moving back, you mentioned the populists and the movement that was there. A lot of these movements that kind of led to the progressive era and then later on kind of rose again and culminated in the New Deal. Uh, a lot of them were driven first by, well, were driven by, of course, the grassroots, but the unions really being like the glue to kind of get the organizing and get the foot soldiers on the ground and get the information out to everyone. How can we kind of mimic that without those institutions there? Like, remember the institutions that exist at that time, they've all been ravaged one by one in order to get them back to where they are today, in order to get us back to where we are today.
Well, it's interesting that very, very interesting point that you're raising. Actually, the percent of the population that's unionized in the 1880s and in the progressive era, at the turn of the century up until the New Deal, it's about the same as now. The big rise took place from 1933 to 1970, roughly. That's when the big explosion took place, especially in the 30s and 40s. But you're right to say that the unions were very active and involved, because the few unions that were around were very good, right? And they made a big difference.
Incredibly.
There's still a few unions around that are very good and make a big difference. Any union that survives now has got to be, is got something together. But there's a few of them who stand out, like the Communication Workers of America, the Service Employees Workers, the National Nurses United, the Amalgamated Transit Union, the Postal Workers Union, the Steel Workers. These are unions that actually care about movement building more or less. Several of them were key in the Sanders campaign, poured an enormous amount of resources in it. And so they can still form the core of exactly what you're describing. So we don't have to do it alone. The former head of the Communication Workers of America, Larry Cohn, is the political director of our revolution. And he was the key labor person for Sanders and brought some of the other unions in. So there's some very, very good labor people who are still involved, who, if you had them on this show, they'd be right on your wavelength. You'd have a fantastic interview. I can reckon, Larry Cohn would be one. Roseanne DeMoro from the National Nurses United California, she'd be fantastic. Bob Master from CWA. You would have in New York, who was also co-chair of the Working Families Party. These people are movement builders. But success is not guaranteed. But the good news is we saw the beginnings of this with Occupy Wall Street. That was the first shot across the bow. Unfortunately, it was disorganized and it fell apart. I
think it was destroyed by the police, not just fell apart. It didn't collapse on its own.
More than that. It was more than that. I'm telling you, they couldn't make decisions. They couldn't have any leaders. They had no plan for the winter. They had all the money you can imagine. People were throwing money at them, but they believed in horizontal organizing, and there's another whole interview about organizing stuff. Then we have Black Lives Matter, which obviously has become a very potent force, and then the Sanders campaign. So you can see that these broad-based national efforts are possible. There were 900 encampments of Occupy Wall Street. That was phenomenal. They're the reason we're talking about runaway inequality in Wall Street. They put it on the map. I don't know if people remember, but the summer before was the summer of the so-called grand bargain between the Obama administration, the Democrats, and the Republicans to cut Social Security and tighten our belts. And then the conversation switched just because of Occupy Wall Street. So there's power to be had. We have to organize it. We have to harness it. And I'm hoping that young folks like you will be able to really fan the flames, and we can get another generation of people who really, really want to build a movement organization. That's the direction we have to head into.
I agree with you, especially everything you just said. It's just I still feel like outside of the movements are coming. There seems to be, especially with some of the names you named there seems to be a lack of militancy. Like there was a determination that existed that you can read about when you read some of the activists in their writings, and you hear about some of the people that were orators of the time. There was a tenacity and a militancy that I think that is still not quite there. I don't see anybody saying, you know, this is the way it's going to be. This is what we want. You know, I still feel like maybe there's just maybe it's not quite there yet. It's building. Maybe it'll come, maybe it won't. I'm not sure.
I'm very impressed with the way you're analyzing the situation, because you're sort of expressing a lot of my inner fears and thoughts. I noticed the same thing that you just talked about, and I was advocating. I said, look, day after the inauguration, we got to bring 1 million people to Washington. Got to shut the place down and demand the financial transaction tax for free higher education. Get kids and their parents from all over the country and shut down DC. Bring 1 million people in. That'll show Congress that we mean business. But they're afraid to do it. They're afraid, oh, what if we only get 100,000? It won't be good. So there's this timidity. Remember, see, what you're talking about, what I'm talking about is the same thing. The headset hasn't gotten there yet. We're still trapped in, oh, maybe we can accommodate ourselves within, you know, the current power arrangements. We can't. They're going to crush us. We're going to have to build something new. So I think two things have to happen. That assertiveness that you're talking about, combined with organization. You know, it's spontaneous revolt. It's not going to work. It's wonderful to see, but we have to actually build something that could sustain a struggle for 10 or 20 years. It took a long time to get us into this mess. It's going to take us a long time to get us out.
I 100% agree with you. And I just want to add one thing to that. You know, we have to understand also that it could be 10 or 20 years from the moment we start having the tenacity. So, you know, the movement building is forming. It still didn't have its tenacity, still didn't have critical mass. But once we have it, it has to be sustained.
Amen.
Sustained for years. Amen. Because they're not going to roll over and give us anything. Neoliberalism, Amen. I say it 1,000,000 times, it's not going to go quietly into the night. It's not going to pack up its bags and go home. We're going to have to beat it back, and we're going to have to hold it back, you know, for the next generation and beyond. So that's just what it is. I'm going to give you the last word, Les, and then we're going to close out for the viewers. Maybe I'll answer a few questions and hang around for them, but I don't want to, you know, basically monopolize your time. I've taken quite a bit of it as is. My last word is everybody should be listening to you. I agree with everything you just said, and that's exactly right. Build for the long term. Everyone should be listening to you. Keep saying it. That's my last word. Keep saying what you're saying. Thank you, Les. Thank you for sharing your time with us. And again, remember, his book is Runaway Inequality, An Activist Guide to Economic Justice. And, Les, you're free to stay or leave whenever you like. I'm going to go ahead and just go to our channel here and see if any of the viewers have anything pertinent, like any questions or whatnot I can answer while I still have 5 or so minutes. Okay, I'm going to talk about something that hadn't been on my mind. Good night, everybody. Good night. Thank you so much.